will call this meeting to order and open with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Robert Begarow. Rick Boggs.
Here.
Emily Butler.
Here.
Charlie Davis.
Here.
Justin Epperson.
Here.
Ann Rogers.
Here.
Jerry Truex.
Here. Okay, we do have a quorum. Backtracking a little bit, I usually greet everybody. Thank you for coming to our hearing tonight. This is the January 2nd, 2020 hearing of Planning and Zoning Commission. And if you are addressing the commission during the meeting, we ask that you step forward and use the podium, please. Okay, we'll go right into the old business section. The first item, rezoning application ZON 18004, Miranda Homes. And this is to remain tabled. It's approaching the 2-year mark. I know we've had contact with them.
That's correct.
Would the commission's pleasure be to ask that we proceed at the 2-year mark, the May meeting?
The May meeting would be May 6th.
Okay.
So that would be like 2 years and 4 days.
Okay. And so if you would let them know that we will take action if we haven't heard either way. I mean, we'd like them to respond. They've had plenty of time.
Should I let them know that documentation needs to be in the deadline of April
Right.
3rd for the May 6th meeting?
Yes, please.
I will do that.
Any concerns by the commission members?
And then on that time, we will take it off the table and let them
And proceed with it. Okay, thank you. That was the only item of old business. New business, amendment to preliminary plan application ZON 19005, Summit, or Scenic View Estates.
Thank you, sir. Like you said, this is ZON-19-005. The applicant here is Scenic View Estates LLC. Location is an unapproved property at 0 Middle Ground Road. Current acreage is 136.23 acres. It's currently zoned R10, high density residential, and the applicant's requesting a recommendation of approval of an amended preliminary plan for a 60-lot planned development district. So if you look, here's the area map of the property outlined in yellow. And just a quick summary, a little bit of zoning history on this. So it was approved or recommended for approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission last year at the May 2nd hearing, and council heard the application on June 17th. Which at that point it was tabled. The utility committee had concerns regarding the unique nature of the proposed sanitary systems. So staff compiled a list of the concerns the utility committee had, shared those with the applicant. Staff prepared language to be included with the development text, plans, and HOA documents to address the concerns of the utility committee, which were then reviewed by the law director and presented to the utility committee on October 21st of last year for consideration, and those were accepted. And then the applicant met with staff on October 28th to discuss language. The applicant had no issues with the proposed language. A revised set of plans for review and comment were submitted, and the applicant met with staff once again in early December, and at that point the applicant submitted this amendment for the preliminary plan application for consideration. So the proposed amendment, we have the utility committee language, sanitary system requirements and protections, and some tree protection language. Lot reconfigurations, the addition of an amenity area, and walking paths. We'll just cover this quickly. Heavily wooded, several ravines, large elevation changes of wetlands. To the north and east it abuts Beechwood trails. Here's the current site conditions. You can see the wetlands are the cross-shaded areas here, and several smaller ones up here. This is previously considered for development as a 224-unit subdivision with through access between the city of Tasco and Harrison Township. However, that project was abandoned. Here is a look at the previous plan that was submitted for this area. And this proposal is again to develop it into a 60-lot planned residential development that would utilize large lots and cul-de-sacs with no through access to preserve natural open space, and all streets are private. So Here is the previous plan that was approved on May 1st here, and this is the proposed amendment. So the number of home sites, total acreage, open space.
Can we back up? You get a chance to see any of this?
Please let the staff continue there. We can back up if you would like to, but again, this is the time for the staff to make their recommendation or to make
Yeah,
a
we can-
report.
We can always refer back to the slide at a
Right.
later date if anyone has questions. So home sites, total acreage, open space, and density are remaining the same as approved. Lot sizes and dwelling sizes remain the same as approved in the previous plan. Here are the architectural examples that have remained the same. Setbacks, front, side, rear, all remaining the same as approved in May 1st. Access is 5 cul-de-sacs, 4 streets in Harrison Township, and 1 off the streets in the city of Pataskala are to be private streets. Here's a look at the access points. The north and east ones here are coming off of Harrison Township roads, and the one in the south off of Devoncroft Ridge in the city of Pataskala. So some of the lots are to have direct access to the cul-de-sacs, others would be flagpole lots with private common access drives that will serve each lot, and those locations are to be determined at a later date with final engineering. Here's an example of what the flag lots look like. You can see there's a long sort of access coming off the main cul-de-sac into a larger lot area at the back. That's the building area. Here's a closer look at these common access drives that are proposed. They're the darker shaded areas here. Signage, so at each entryway, signage essentially remain the same. We're going to have 2 stone columns on either side with a small sign and a gate. Here's a proposed look at the entry columns and the gate. Landscaping, the disturbance of existing trees is to be limited to 20 feet around the perimeter of the structures, and no additional landscaping is proposed. So here's a list of the approved divergences that were approved in the May 1st hearing. Section 1113.06Q, no streetlights. Section 1117.10, cul-de-sacs that are to exceed 500 feet. Section 1117.10, reduce the pavement width from 28 feet to 20 feet. Section 1255.10B, to reduce open space from 35% to 0%. Section 1283.03, no tree replacement. 1283.05, no street trees. 1117.15, no sidewalks. 1121.12, no curb and gutter. And section 1255.10C, reduce the lots abutting common open space from 50% to 0%. And again, I emphasize that this was previously approved, and this is generally what we're looking at here tonight, the amendments, things that are changing, those being the utility committee language for the sanitary system and tree protection requirements, the lot reconfiguration, amenity area, and the walking paths. So the utility committee had concerns, and staff drafted this language along with the committee and had it reviewed by the law director. So their main concerns were sanitary service, the gravity versus force mains. The scenic view HOA is going to be responsible for the gravity main if it's required. Technical specifications of the sanitary lines and easements. Only the collective force main will be the city's responsibility. Pumping station requirements, increased penalties for unauthorized tree removal, and the language for those are all in the dais there. This area shaded in red is to be the gravity sanitary sewer, and everything else is going to be on the force main. The amended lot configuration made the lots more linear, increased size and classification of the wetlands, the addition of the amenity area in the southeast corner, and the number of lots and density again remain the same as approved. So again, here's a look at the previous plan and the proposed amendment. The amended landscaping, the amenity area was added, which includes a community house, parking area, and mailboxes. Potential additions include a pool, tennis court, playgrounds, which are to be decided by the HOA at a later date. And walking paths are proposed to connect each phase back to the amenity area. So here's a look at the illustrative plan showing a top-down view. And as part of our review, we have the future land use map designates this property as high-density residential. And per the comprehensive plan of 2006, high-density residential is a maximum of 3 dwelling units per acre, and the developers proposed 0.44 units per acre, which would be in line with the comprehensive plan. So planning and zoning staff has revised their review, which is attached to your staff report there. Comments which have been satisfied are struck through, comments which still need addressed remain, and new comments and clarifications aren't read. However, most of these comments are general comments, including revisions, typos, etc. Notable changes from the previous approval on May 1st are an amenity area, which was included in the southwest corner of the development, phase 1.1, the walking paths. Wetland areas identified on the plans have expanded in accordance with the most recent survey, and total wetland impact is identified at 0.09 acres. A large Category 3 wetland in the southwest will be bridged entirely where it's crossed by the common access drive, and the lots have been rearranged for more linear design. The following divergences have also been requested: a reduction of the 20-foot buffer around the wetlands and water courses, in some locations. This was needed to construct the bridge over the Category 3 wetland, and the location is to be determined at final engineering. And from section 1291.02A4 to allow the driveways to be constructed with gravel. In addition to those, the following divergences are also required, however they were not identified in the development text. Section 1295.09B8 for having 2 subdivision entry signs, from section 1117.17C for lots not abutting the public thoroughfare, and section 1117.17F for lots 3 times their width, or in other words, to allow for the flag lots. So here's a look at the bridge location. You can see the large Category 3 wetland here, and they will be spanning the entire distance with the bridge. So as part of this review, we sent it around to all the city departments and agencies. We received the following comments back from our city engineer. They included their original comments from April 19th, 2019, as some of them still apply. And they also stated they spoke with the utilities director, and the applicant has provided for future utility easements should the gravity sewer be requested by council. The public service director also included his original comments, as he believes they are all still applicable. And he also had one additional comment: it does not appear the stormwater quality and quantity controls have been included in this plan, and that this may be okay, but a stormwater report will be needed to identify any specific needs or to show there will be no adverse effects. The utilities director stated that in addition to the development text and preliminary plan, the language that was required by the utility committee regarding the water and sanitary systems must be included in section 6 of the deed restrictions, and once that language is included, he has no further comments. The joint fire district had the following comments: the roads over 500 feet in length to the nearest fire hydrant shall have a hydrant installed. 2, security gates shall have a way to open the electric gates if power is out. 3, roads shall be a minimum width of 20 feet and be maintained at all times for fire access. And 4, cul-de-sacs required to be a minimum of 96 feet in width. We forwarded this to the Licking County engineer, and they had the following comments: 1 being Mill Ground Road along the east property line of Regret Drive require culvert crossing outside city limits, and they asked that the applicant show the proposed culvert sizes to be decided during construction plans, and to provide a 4-inch step out on item 301 and a 6-inch step out on item 304. And we also forwarded this to Harrison Township, and they have one comment that the construction plans are to be reviewed by the county and township at the time. We have Southwest Licking Local Schools stated that the superintendent submitted a letter stating that Southwest Licking has no issue with the current layout of the proposed subdivision. The letter is attached to your staff report. We had one citizen submit comments. That was Nancy Arledge, and we received an email from her today on January 2nd, 2020, which has been printed out and provided on your dais. So the surrounding properties, to the north we have it zoned R15 in Harrison Township that are single-family homes. To the east, it's also zoned R15 residential in Harrison Township, some more single-family homes. To the south, it is zoned R7, Village Single-Family Residential, which is single-family homes. And to the west, we have R15 medium-high density residential, which is currently vacant. And here's sort of an illustrative look at what the surrounding zonings look like with the subject property here. Harrison Township is unshaded. The whitish down here is R7, and to the west, R15. So modifications: should the Planning and Zoning Commission choose to approve the applicant's request, the following modifications may be considered. The applicant shall address all comments from the Planning and Zoning staff, city engineer, public service director, public utilities director, Licking County Engineer, Harrison Township, and the West Licking Joint Fire District. Planning and Zoning Commission shall grant the following divergences in addition to those that were identified in the proposed development text. The first one being from section 129509B8 to allow for more than one subdivision entrance sign, from section 1117.17C to allow for lots that will not front a public thoroughfare, and section 1117.17F to allow for the flag lots. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Jack. Ask for questions for the staff from commission members. I'll start with Ann.
Not yet.
Okay. Charlie?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Justin?
Was it determined as far as, I know we mentioned in the last meeting about, like snow removal and street care on the cul-de-sacs, because those would be technically taskable, correct?
No, we spoke with the developer, road maintenance, snow plow, et cetera, would be maintained by the HOA, so it'd all be private. The city township has no responsibility for
So
that.
from the gates back?
Correct.
is theirs, and up to the gates is township?
Township and city were applicable.
Okay. Mailboxes, I know that was kind of a question mark too, as that moved all to that new kind of joint area you were discussing?
That's correct. On each cul-de-sac, the post office now requires cluster mailboxes for all new subdivisions, so you can't have house to house. So at the end of the cul-de-sac, on each of those locations, they will have a set of cluster mailboxes within the gates.
That's all I have for now.
Thanks. Jerry?
Just wanna get my math right, so high density actually could have allowed up to 408 if it was 3
Minimum
houses
lot,
per acre.
yeah, minimum lot size, 10,000 square feet.
10,000 square feet, so it could have been almost 408 houses. Originally, it was at 224, and this applicant is asking for 60, is that correct in my?
That's correct.
Okay. Second of all, just wanna get a timeline. I know that Harrison asked that, that the construction plans be reviewed by county officials. And then we did have the Licking County officials will also get the same opportunity, right, to take a look at the construction.
That's correct. In terms of a timeline, should this, regardless of whatever recommendation is made, this will proceed on to council. It's on the third reading. It was tabled on the third reading, so third reading will occur probably on January 25th. The fourth reading will be at the beginning of February, and they'll make their final decision beginning of first meeting in February. Following that, then they can proceed on to the construction engineering drawings.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
No more questions.
Thanks. Emma?
So I have two quick questions. First, I know that these would be private roads, so it wouldn't be the duty of the city to maintain it all, but have we expressed any concern with wash off of tar and gravel, especially with that area being so heavily wetland comprised?
Talking to public service director, he has not expressed any concern with a tar and chip road in that location.
Okay. And then for the sewage pump station, I know that the lines into it would be the responsibility of the HOA to maintain, but is that true for the other structure of the pump station?
The pump station at the north end would be the responsibility of the city. Any line coming off the force main line to the home is the responsibility of each individual homeowner. And the way that the system is constructed, from what I'm told, it only takes one functional pump to make the whole line work. So as long as everybody's working, should all of them go out, that's where the pump station will come into play.
Okay. Thanks. No further questions.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions at this time for staff? Okay. Next in the sequence, I'll ask the applicant to step forward and if you have a presentation or anything. And I'll need to swear you in. Do you swear that any testimony you will give in this matter will be the whole truth as you shall answer unto God?
I do.
Okay, start with your name and address, please.
It's Gary Smith with G2 Planning and Design, 720 East Broad Street, Columbus, Ohio. Members of the commission, thanks for the opportunity to get in front of you again today. I know we have a couple of new faces. Welcome and congratulations, I guess. So since there are a couple of new faces, I think maybe just a little bit of background is probably helpful. I know several of the commission members have seen this before. This came before the commission in May 1st, I believe. Jack, you mentioned that. This was approved initially unanimously by the commission at that time. Since that time, really the only thing that's changed is we've gone back and there was a lot of discussion about how the whole sanitary system was going to be installed and maintained, and the city's concerns about whose responsibility. So it ended up, what we kind of worked out with the department and with council was that we were just going to craft a lot of additional language and insert that into the development text. So we're adding a bunch of new language into the development text, which you guys have already seen. And then we've actually gone out and taken another look at the site conditions, and as a result of that, we've reconfigured a number of those lots to be a little bit more responsible in terms of how we access some of those lots and how we preserve some of those natural features. Because again, all of this really is back to kind of the applicant's goal to try and develop a really nice subdivision here with having as minimal impact as possible on the site. So from a history standpoint, I don't know if you could go back to that first layout. Yeah, there you go. So this has been zoned R10 for quite some time. Initially, it was owned by Dominion Homes. Their idea or their thought in this was to come in with kind of more of a traditional or a typical subdivision layout. This one was for, I think, approximately 230 lots, meeting the R10 standards. In the recession, basically that got abandoned. And then when Dominion sold out to Pulte, a lot of the land that they had in the development cycle also got sold off to get it off of their balance sheets. And so the current owner bought it at that point in time and has been kind of turning this over in his head, what he wants to do with this beautiful site. This is really kind of, for me, a first in having a land developer come to me and say, you know, usually the process is, hey, tell me what I can get on this based on what the zoning is. How many lots can I get on it? How are we gonna lay it out? How are we gonna put it together? That was not the first thing that he asked me. The first thing that he asked me was, how can we develop this in a way that's responsible, that can create some really nice, unique home sites that are unique to Pataskala and kind of the surrounding area, maintain the woods, maintain a lot of the environmental features, and do it in a way where we can create some kind of unique and individual views back on that property and kind of take advantage of what we have here. And so this is kind of the end result of that. Jack, if you could forward that a little bit. I know we've had a lot of conversations. You know, we've been at this for a little over a year now. Was submitted, I think, initially to the city in early of last year, going through the cycle, and have had a lot of conversations and a lot of investigations since this point in time. One of the things that's, I know, actually I heard a little bit of whispering earlier behind me that these were connected. They're actually not. There are five individual contact points, and this doesn't work on the TV. So there's 5 access points. None of those are connected from a vehicular standpoint. So one of the things that was a big concern, especially from the neighbor's standpoint with the earlier plan, was that loop road that connected basically all those streets would create opportunities for cut through into the other areas to get through the site to the Kroger or up into some of the other areas of the township. And so none of these are connected from a vehicular standpoint. They're still all individual. So you've got 60 home sites, but each one of those home sites is access off of its own cul-de-sac, not connected to the other individual sub-areas. So I just wanted to set that out there. You know, from our standpoint, the only other thing that we've added is the opportunity at the entry for an amenity area. So as the the owner of the property has kind of been traveling the country, going to different trade shows. That's where a lot of the architecture came from, and is for the architecture that you see in the booklets. You know, he started looking at what would people want to have in their community potentially from the opportunity to have a little bit of amenity. So what his intent was with this was to create an area where they could install some amenities, but he was going to, as he sold the lots, work with the individual buyers to see kind of what their preferences were for amenities, what they would want to have in their community. Not only what would they want to have, but what would they be willing to maintain. So not necessarily installing something up front, but to be a little bit more responsive to the buyers as people came in and said, hey, I'm really interested in a lot. We really love the architecture. We really love the kind of bringing everything in with nature concept, and but we really love a tennis court, something of that nature. So he wanted to give people the opportunity to have some amenities on the site, but not necessarily define up front what those were. So we've tried to create some language in the text that allows that to happen. And those really are the major changes. So it's just a difference in lot. The lot sizes are basically the same. The setbacks are the same as what you've already approved. The total density, total number of lots is the same. The only other thing that we've added is the opportunity for some pedestrian connection through the site. So where we are going to have some minimal utility work, we wanted to take advantage of some of those connection points and put, some opportunity for trails there for people to kind of walk through, because we're going to have easements in those locations. So instead of having a trail on individual property, we're just going to have trails on those easements that will allow people to kind of walk through the site and take a little bit more advantage of the site than just, having a house on it. So those are really the major changes. At this point, I don't want to waste a lot of the commission's time. We're happy to answer any questions. We have no issues with the staff report. We read through all of the comments. We're certainly willing to comply with all of those things. None of those are of any concern. We feel like we can comply. So we're just excited to kind of bring this back in and continue moving this thing forward. We think it's a good development for the city of Tasscon. Certainly unique.
Thank you. So now we ask for questions for the applicant from the commission members. Let's start with Charlie this time.
My question would be, what would be the price point of the housing? Do you know that at this time?
That's a really good question. There's a lot, and Dave, I don't know if you can answer that, if we've discussed it at this point. But there is, the lots are gonna be pretty expensive, as you can imagine. The lots are probably gonna be above the $100,000 range, I would imagine.
Some under, some over.
Some under, some over, okay. And so the houses, if you apply the typical formula to that, usually the houses, the total is about 4 to 5 times the lot price. So we're looking at houses probably anywhere between 400,000 and on up, depending on ultimately what the buyer wants. Especially when you look at kind of the architectural restrictions and some of the things that the builder or the builders that he's identified, those houses can get pretty expensive when you consider all the windows, all the indoor views. We envision them to be a fairly exclusive, expensive homes.
The second question I have was the amenities. What type, other than the pools, or what other things are you thinking? I know the language is different, so you can have room to work. What are your thoughts of the things they're thinking about putting in there?
I think the two that obviously everybody kind of falls back on are potentially the pool. Will they want a pool? Tennis courts are very popular now. That could also extend to like pickleball courts. So if it's a largely older population, it could be pickleball over tennis. It's a growing sport, very similar to tennis in terms of the type of court. It's a little bit smaller court, but not as much running, so it's very attractive to people who are getting older like me. Don't like to run back and forth as much. Shuffleboard, bocce, those kind of things is what we envision ultimately.
And I want to thank you for bringing me up to speed from the history, because I'm
Sure.
one of the new on the staff. So
Sure.
that's it.
Okay, thank you. I have one question at this point. There was a point in the staff report about the surfacing on the private streets and cul-de-sacs.
Glad you brought that up. The cul-de-sacs, and we probably need to word that, we can probably word that differently. The cul-de-sacs will all be asphalt. The common access drives can be a gravel or tar and chip. And the reason that we've done that is we want to have the opportunity to develop those common access drives basically on site. The applicant's intent is to open up those home sites, sell them, and then come in and say, okay, well, maybe we need to move this driveway over a little bit, create an easement, we want to avoid this tree. We won't know what that looks like until they go out there and actually start surveying those individual home sites. So they wanted to give them the opportunity to, to be more flexible, to have porous pavement options to kind of save those tree roots and preserve as much of that tree structure as can be. But the streets themselves, the cul-de-sacs, will all be asphalt, meet the standards.
Okay, thank you. Justin?
The walking trails you're talking about, are these the lighter gray areas that we see connecting a couple of the private
Yeah,
drives?
it's really hard to show with the laser pointer, but I don't know, Jack, if you can use your pointer to kind of point out where they are.
We got
Okay,
one
yeah, that's what I thought they were.
here,
Yeah,
here.
they just connect those, essentially connect those points.
So
So
all
they'll go
lots-
along the common access drive and,
So all lots, essentially, you could walk to the amenities area without having to drive around?
yes, you could walk through the site. I mean, the whole goal is to get people into the site and experience the site. We want the homes themselves to kind of have that outside-in appearance, big windows just open up onto that. I mean, it's a really beautiful site, and we want to make those, we want to give people that experience, allow them to have that experience.
Jerry?
One question, in your packet, you still have these pictures of these houses. Is this the standard, or is this similar to, or what's these pictures of these houses?
The pictures, this is a builder that the applicant has identified that he really likes and would prefer, and this is the style of architecture that he has envisioned for this site. And that's essentially how we crafted a lot of the standards in the development text to kind of allow for this range of styles. But again, more natural materials, big windows, cedar siding, different types of materials rather than just kind of the typical, vinyl stucco.
Is that reflected in the HOA document?
I haven't read the HOA documents. I've only read this middle document, so I would have to go back and take a look. David, do you know offhand?
I know for a fact it's in the development text, so from a zoning standpoint, that's required.
Okay, so that is required.
It's required. And in speaking with the developer, he has stated that as he begins this, he will personally approve the first houses in the subdivision until such time the HOA takes over. So he'll be approving it, we have the development text, and at such time that the HOA takes over, the city's still responsible for making sure they meet these requirements.
He's gonna have an internal architectural review committee, essentially, that will approve these houses, make sure that they meet the standards established for the development.
The amenity area, and this is probably for Jack and Scott, is there anything, or walk me through how that happens if they decide they wanna put a, whatever it was, or a swimming pool? What's the steps? Do they have to come back to zoning? What has to happen?
We'll be within the final development plan, we'll be going through construction, then final development plan if approved. Then at that point, we hope to work with the developer to try and narrow that down. But our next step would be to identify, if we mentioned bocce, pickleball, those types of things, identify those. If swimming pool goes in, that requires a permit, tennis courts do not, bocce court does not, so some of that will rely on individual permits, setbacks, and things of that nature. So could require a permit, could not, depending upon what goes in.
Okay. But do we have a right to say that doesn't really fit, or do we not?
I guess it's dependent upon the text at this point, that I believe the developer left it somewhat ambiguous, as he's gonna listen to the voice of the HOA. I think anything that goes in there that needs a permit will be reviewed by staff, but if a bocce court goes in, we have no permitting for that. So I think that's dependent upon what is proposed. So there's a lot of variables at this point.
If we put that in modifications, could that be done, that all amenities need to meet city, qualifications, or is that something, or not? I'm just asking.
We can do that. We have something in here that if this development text is silent, then the Pataska code prevails. So if they don't talk about setbacks or anything regarding a swimming pool, city requirements prevail, they'll need a permit and they'll have to meet our requirements.
Scott, real quick, so we're required to come back with a final development plan.
That's correct.
So we come back with a final development plan, at some point in time, let's say they decide, yes, the neighbors, the homeowners get together, the buyers get together and say, we want a pool, we want a tennis court. Would we not have to come back to you with an amended final development plan?
And again, that's dependent because we haven't gotten to the final development plan at this point and the way the text reads. So again, a lot of variables still
Okay.
left.
I wondered if that's part of the process.
That is a possibility that could happen.
Okay, because that would seem to solve, I guess, the question, if that was the case, that that was part of the process.
Thank you, and then I have one more question for you. Do you have any ideas of where these designated amenity areas are gonna be right now, or you still don't know till you do the final plan?
Well, I mean, we've established the one lot, so, right there at the entry. So, any of those amenities that are gonna be located in that one.
Only there, so they won't go on the back side or anything like that?
Correct.
No more questions, sir?
Thanks. Emma?
No questions for me.
Thank you. Ann?
I guess I want to ask all these. Be a small question about the
Mhm.
walking paths you're thinking about.
Mhm.
Would those be paved?
Probably not. Again, I think we want to create an opportunity for paths that are stable enough that you can walk on, but not something that's going to require a lot of excavation, carving out, taking out of tree roots, those kind of things. So we want to create probably a crushed gravel path is what I'm envisioning. So it'd be something very similar that you would get in like a Metro Parks or something like that when you take a walk through the woods. It'd be more like that.
So they
Something-
would be maintained by the HOA?
Yes.
Okay. And then, recently there's been discussion about the failing HOA in the Beechwood, I'm sorry, what's that subdivision that we're talking about with that right next door? Beechwood Trails, sorry,
Yeah.
thank you. They're having trouble getting support for their pool. And so the pool's looking neglected and that type of thing. So I'm concerned about failing HOAs.
Yep.
And there is a lot of responsibility put on this HOA in particular because of the streets. And so I'm just really concerned about that, but I don't know that there's anything we can do about it, but is there, I guess this is a question for Scott, if the HOA fails with the streets, what happens?
There was a lot of discussion because that was our concern as well, that, sometimes you see strong HOAs in perpetuity, some are strong and fizzle out, some just never take off, or combination thereof. Due to the number of responsibilities of the HOA, staff felt confident that you have all these responsibilities, that if you're not contributing, there's provisions for assessments, things of that nature, that otherwise your snow doesn't get plowed, your street doesn't get repaired, things of that nature. So there's assessments and things built into their HOA documents that makes it very difficult for this not to function as it should. And again, we did have those concerns as well.
A couple things I think that are important to consider in that, again, because these streets are very limited access, each cul-de-sac only serves a very limited number of homes, and there's no cut through between cul-de-sac and cul-de-sac. There's not gonna be a considerable amount of traffic on each cul-de-sac, so those should generally last longer without the volume of traffic that will go through those. The other, your question brings up a good point about the pool. That's one of the reasons why we wanted them to allow, to talk to the buyers and say, we can put a pool in here, but the obligation is gonna be on you ultimately to let them make the decision. So, a pool is gonna cost X to develop, and, studies have shown that it takes X to develop long-term. So are you guys comfortable assessing the houses for a pool? Is that, if it's that important to you? Or would you rather, have a small pool in your backyard? Or, so that was one of the reasons why he wanted to allow, kind of poll the buyers before just plopping something like that down and saddling the homeowners association with something that they may not want to pay for down the line. So giving them the option.
That's all I have right now.
Thank you. Of course, the problem, the loophole in that is the initial buyers is who he's talking to. And as
For sure.
change,
But future buyers, when they buy,
They
full
would know what's
disclosure,
there.
they will know exactly
Right.
what those HOA fees are before they purchase a house.
right, okay. And then there was the, and staff, Scott or Jack, I'm not sure if you want, the language that the utility committee addresses, the utility committee concerns.
Yes.
Did we kind of review that? That's going to be, and you said you had no issues with this, correct?
Yep. We've already reviewed it, inserted in the language, we've agreed with staff and the utility commission and council, so we've already incorporated that, and that's one of the reasons why we're back in front of you guys today.
Yeah, the requirement, when we spoke with the utility committee at a meeting, they expressed their concerns and directed staff, the utility director, myself, to develop language that would address their concerns, namely the force main system, technical details associated with that. The big one was, what if at some time we have a force main, currently the EPA says that's fine, you can do it. What if some point the EPA says, when you change your mind, you have to change it? At that point, the individual property owners will be assessed to install a gravity line. Personally, or the utility director felt that that's probably not going to happen, 99.9% probability that will not happen, but the utility committee wanted those protections in place, that it would be the city's responsibility to take on putting in a system of that nature. So in discussing with them, we said it will be development text, HOA documents, development plan, construction plan, the final development plan, plat. It'll be all over the place so that there is no,
Confusion.
that's the word, in terms of what's going on. So those have been reviewed by utility, developed by staff, and reviewed by our law director.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any last?
Real quick, the private street, are they going to be lit? Is there some sort of lighting going on in there? Is that the city's?
No, our intent is to kind of, to follow kind of that dark sky. We want this to really feel like a natural setting. We don't want the streets to be lit. We want it to feel very private, very quiet. And, we want people to be able to go out, and not worry about the street lights when they look up in the sky.
Also, I know that fire already covers that area, but it's kind of like for law enforcement, there's kind of a line there on those 4 cul-de-sacs coming off of
Yep.
township there.
Mm-hmm.
So, was there any discussion or issues on that?
There was. We spoke with the the police department, and they said if it's in our area, we will cover it. So they have no issues with policing that area.
Access through the gates and.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And you might be able to speak on this more for the Tascola side off of Devoncroft Ridge, but like snow removal up to the gate, was there any sort of issues that the utility director saw with that, with the trucks turning around or having a weird kind of issue there?
There was not. The public service director said it was fine.
Okay, so we could assume township would be on the same boat with their.
Per our discussions, I believe this was probably early last year. We discussed snow plowing in terms of how we would make it happen. At that time, they expressed no concerns in terms of plowing, but they would not be plowing the end of the cul-de-sacs. That's why it reverted to private.
Right, because I'm assuming now they probably just push it right off the end of the road, so.
Correct.
It would be a little more strenuous to maneuver that.
They would plow to the end, to the township line essentially.
Right.
We understand that.
Right. Okay, that's all.
The gate is gonna be inside of that line, so the gate's not gonna be right on the township city line.
Well, yeah, I mean, either way, I didn't want the HOA pushing it right into the township area on the line and vice versa, township just shoving it right there, saying it's yours now, deal with it, so,
Right. No, we want the snow out of the road
yeah, exactly.
at the end of the day, yes.
I had one question about the trees and the removals and that. You know, we all know that there's ash borer that went through there, so there's gonna be ash trees that, you know, are going to be dead, or even some pines still back from the old pine needle or moth, I'm sorry. But my question is, do we have a plan for that? Are those just gonna go down? Are those gonna stay? What's the thoughts on how that will happen?
Well, if there are dead or dying trees, we always have the opportunity to remove those, especially if they are a danger to the remaining trees. I mean, the goal is to keep as many of that healthy wooded stand as we can. So to the extent that we have dead or dying trees in there to clean that up, we have the ability to do that. But our goal is, you know, if they're not dying, if they're not diseased, we want to leave them alone.
I just know that we had a little issue with the one apartments there on 310. Just wanna make sure we don't have an issue where all of a sudden someone starts taking down trees
Yeah.
that we feel need to be.
No, I mean,
Sure.
the whole reason for doing this and the whole reason for setting this up, I mean, this is one of the reasons why we have all of these divergences, right? I mean, we're trying to do something that's kind of incredibly unique. If we were gonna just develop this under the subdivision regulations and under the zoning, it would be incredibly destructive to the site, and that's not what he did. I mean, the whole reason this is different from everything that you guys have is because, for one sole purpose, is we're trying to do everything we can to make these nice, pristine home sites that will allow for homes to kind of fit in and around trees. I mean, each one of these sites, when they come in, when they buy a lot, they're gonna have to come back with a tree survey to the owner and the architectural committee. The architect's gonna have to come with building plans. So they're gonna have to show how these houses are gonna fit on the site, where the driveway's gonna go, how that's gonna respond to the trees, and everything else. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, I mean, if you look at this site, I mean, it's basically 25% of the density of the previous plan, and it's less than 25% of what could ultimately be approved by zoning. And that's all to create some very nice, pristine home sites. And they're gonna go through a lot of effort to make sure that houses are sited to avoid any of those natural features, to try and avoid trees, and to, you know, to create a nice, pristine site as they possibly can, to put their houses in, get situated so they all have good views. It's gonna be a very, very highly regulated process. I mean, he's sat on this property since 2013. I mean, he's really thought this through, created a vision in his head of what he wants, and is intent on sticking with it, as challenging as it is to go through all the divergences and everything else.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Don't go too far.
I won't, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. Okay, that's fine.
You wanna- Well, before you do that, this is the point of the meeting where we go to public comment, and Jerry,
I just asked, I didn't know how many speakers we had, and if we normally have a time limit, and just wanted to make sure if we have an extended amount.
I have 7 speaker request forms. Have you received any others, Lisa?
I think you got one more.
Looks like one more.
I guess the question to the council is, what's our thoughts?
Second, thank you.
Thank you.
3 minutes is what was typical, correct? Is that right?
What was
Was it 3 or?
3, yeah,
You
3
want-
minutes. Okay, so we will go with the 3 minute limit, and that puts a little burden on the speakers. We ask it to not repeat everything that the previous person said. And again, something to keep in mind about this application is this is not reviewing the entire development. Tonight's hearing is about the changes that have been made since May 1st. So it's a limited number of issues that we are looking at tonight. So first I'll need to go through the people who have submitted speaker request forms, and then we'll have an open forum at the end for a short while. I'll always apologize if I mispronounce your name. You can correct me when you step forward and identify it. But I'll swear in, I have 8 forms, so I'll do 4 at a time. Swear you in, and then I'll call you up one at a time. The first one, unfortunately, I can't read the last name. Thomas, 399 Middle Ground.
That's right.
Okay, so if you'd stand, and then I'll call up the other 3 and swear you in all at once. Hai Fu, 1783 Keela Drive.
Stand, right?
Drew Clark, 174 Wintergreen, and Eric Bonner, 667 Forward Pass Road. Okay, so for all of you, do you swear that any testimony will give in this matter will be the whole truth as you shall answer unto God?
Yes.
Okay, so if, Thomas, if you'd step forward, you, start with you. And again, if you would repeat your, name and address for the record.
Thomas Owens, 399 Middle Ground. I was here last year for the meeting also. We had requested a different entryway into this, and obviously that's been gone around. So, with that said, what I see with the exits from this development, it comes out to 2 basic streets, Citation and Middle Ground, which spills out onto Watkins. We've already discussed the traffic problems on Watkins. We don't want to see our area turned into a thoroughfare. We have a very calm area now, it's quiet, and people are really good about driving slowly. The other question I would have is there's going to be a lot of construction traffic, heavy equipment. There's gonna be backhoes, bulldozers, so on like that. You're gonna have building material, aggregate, whatever that follows that. Our streets are maintained by Harrison Township. They do a great job. In fact, our trustee is in the audience. My question is going to be, who's going to be responsible for keeping these streets up when this construction traffic is going on and at the end? Is Pataskala going to do it? Are the builders going to do it? Is the homeowners going to do it? The other thing we've talked about is the homeowners are responsible for their cul-de-sac, but shouldn't there be something levied to those homeowners that would put into the tax fund going to Harrison Township for plowing snow, keep of the roads, connector roads, and so on like that? That's my big concern. So, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Hai Fu?
Thank you. First of all, thank you to the developer for trying to keep the land price of the area. But my question would be, based on the previous version, we didn't really see the amenity plans, but now you have the amenity plans. And my guess is that for the rest of the community, we don't have the access to that community area. So have you thought about maybe putting it into a more centralized area instead of right next to the adjacent Keela Drive where there's a lot of homes? My concern is the noise pollution and some other upkeep issues. We went to Beechwood Trail area. There's a tennis court there, and there's a lot of like weed and everything growing out. There's absolutely no maintenance there. So what's the solution to that? So those are my questions. Thanks.
Drew Clark?
Thank you. I want to echo too, I think, based on the plan, that the developer has done a great job at trying to keep the area almost similar to Beechwood Trails. I mean, if you look at everything he's taken out all the street stuff, city stuff, to make it look like township homes on big lots, and we appreciate that. I think it could be a lot worse. But there are some concerns. One is, I know Nancy, who owns the stable, has been talking with you all and council and Harrison Township about her concerns. I would ask the developer, if they haven't already, to just reach out to her and try to see if they can address her concerns. That stable is a staple of the area. It's a very unique thing to have. I mean, I don't know of another stable maybe on the west side around Columbus. A lot of people come in from out of town to use that. And I think those concerns are valid, and I don't think she's against development, but wants to make sure that her business, you know, doesn't suffer. The other question I had, I don't know if I can address questions to be asked, but if I read the documentation right or the plan, some of the sewer or majority of the sewer goes out to Southwest Sewer and Water. Is that true?
That
Or
is
it all Pataskla?
It is all Pataskla.
Okay, that takes away a lot of my concerns with that. The other thing which kind of echoes some of the concerns that you were asking were the restrictions. HOAs fold. I mean, it did in Beechwood Trails. We had a stable, we had a pool, we had a lot to maintain that, and a lot of responsibility. You know, they go under. Luckily, the stable was bought and privately owned. I think my biggest concern is that I don't know what development text means, a little, which is my ignorance on all of this, but my concern is that what in 10 years keeps these restrictions in place after an HOA potential folds, after this commission has been changed over and new hands and things like that, after the developer has moved on. We certainly don't want large lots that suddenly turn into, you know, compounds and homesteads and, you know, the worst case scenarios, taking away these restrictions. So I know a lot of stuff seems okay and right at the beginning, but if you're looking 10 years down the line, I just ask that you look and make sure there's something in stone that keeps those restrictions in place. Because I think what he has laid out is very respectful and could be a nice development, considering the alternative. No cut-throughs and no more than 60 homes would also be a request. I think that is a number that is feasible and again in line with the community. And then the other concern with the roads and the construction traffic. Wintergreen is probably quarter mile from Middle Ground, so we go walking on that all the time. And I can't imagine logging equipment and all that stuff has to go through there, and that's just the nature of the beast. But we want to make sure that because we're responsible for those roads, that there's a path to keep folks accountable. Okay. So thanks for the time.
Thank you. Eric Bonner.
Thanks again. You guys do a great job. You guys are at it every month more than me, and I appreciate it. I just kind of want to echo a little bit of what Drew said, that the development's a better circumstance than what we've had in the past. Can you switch back to the current plan that he has? Can somebody tell me which one of these lots is going to be the recreational lot?
It's in the far bottom left corner.
Lower left.
Oh, okay, down away from the stables. Okay. I mean, with that being said, the cricket games and everything else, I mean, we all know how that's gonna act. One of my concerns is what he mentioned, is that we're gonna pool the people. I'm pretty sure there's not 60 couples standing around waiting for him to develop this site, so I'm not sure how we're gonna pool the people and figure out what they want. They want bocce ball, they want whatever old man game you came up with there.
Pickleball.
Yeah, that game. That's not common around here in Pataskla. Those are the things that we need to think about. You know, how are we gonna maintain that? The same thing with all of our streets. It's all coming out on our land, on our streets. I live in Harrison Township. At some point, in less than 10 years, they do a dang good job of paving those roads, and they actually just paved Middle Ground this year. In 10 years, who's going to take care of that? Because there's more traffic that's getting dumped onto that people are paying Pataskla tax and driving on Harrison. I mean, I realize we drive everywhere. It's kind of a hard statement. But to sit here and talk about, you know, well, they only have to maintain this little cul-de-sac. Well, you're going to be dumping all those people on that same cul-de-sac day in and day out. And if we got gravel lots, you're going to be bringing gravel out on the streets. My kids ride bikes. Bikes and gravel don't work real well. I got scars to prove it. So just things to think about. And another big thing is that my kids go through that stable all the time in the summer. And that is a staple in this community. She has horse shows, she parks people up and down the road, and that's a big deal. You know, I'd hate to see somebody that's invested 26 years of her life to doing what she loves get ruined because we want to jam houses right up against it. On a dry day, when those horses are running around, those 4 or 5 lots right there, including the one across the street of Middle Ground, are gonna be dusted.
Sir, can you show us where that is on the map? Or maybe Jack
And do you
can.
have an idea how many
Okay.
parking spaces she has for her stables?
Parking spots?
Yes.
She's got all the back around the stable, she's got all that drive back there that
Because
she
you said
parks
they're
people.
parking on the road right now, right?
Yeah, down through Regret, they're parking all their stable, you know, their equipment down through there. She currently parks right there, actually, her stables for her, equipment, but all these houses down through here, she's got right, I don't know. Yeah, there's a tower right here. All these houses are gonna get dusted big time come summer when those horses are running around, she's doing all her lessons. So, that's, like Drew said, somebody needs to, she's more than welcome to have people come in, she understands that there's development there that needs to happen. But somebody needs to remember what's gonna be happening there and see what's going on. You're not gonna build a fence there. You know, those are gonna be beautiful homes looking back to those horses. But if it stays there, you know, it's just like anything else, so. Okay, thank you, sorry I went over the time.
Okay, the next 4. Chuck Watkins, 457 Forward Pass. Clayton Rainsford, 102 Cavalcade Lane. Regan Smith and Richard Smith, that's 941 Burtwood Court, and Dan Wolf, 946 Middle Ground. Taking all 5 of you up?
We already got our questions
We're
answered,
good.
we're good,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, so, do you swear that any testimony you will give in this matter will be the whole truth as you shall answer unto God?
I do.
Start with Chuck.
That's all right, you're all right, thank you.
Okay, Chuck Watkins, 457 Forward Pass. Thank you. By the way, you're a technical salesman. Okay. One thing that we have to direct about, Scott, you do a fantastic job speaking up where we can hear you without the mic. Jack, we couldn't hear squat from you, even with the mic. So please keep that in reference, this mic needs to be closer. Okay, the roads, Watkins and Broad Street intersection. You got all these people coming off into, onto Middle Ground there. Right now, we're setting through 3 and 4 traffic lights at a time early in the mornings. More cars, it's going to be, disastrous out there. And school buses, they're setting right now, okay? Please, that's why we as a group didn't want anything coming in off of our, when we say our roads, because as Harrison Township, we pay the taxes for those roads. People from Pataska don't, and I don't think you understand that. That's where our gripe comes in, and maintaining it. Okay, now they talked about, so that's one thing addressed. The roads, they're talking about chip and tar. Okay, I was on city council once and where they talked about doing that, and they did not take the depth of the stone in deep enough. And then, they can chip and tar, but it won't hold up. If you put in asphalt, it's going to crack, corrode, the whole works. Just letting you know. Okay, they're talking about walking paths. No, the main thing is, even my wife and I, as old parts as we are, we walk down, Citation and Middle Ground. There is no, you gotta, get off and completely to stop, from the traffic as it is right now. You put more cars, it's going to be, really bad. But one of the, big thing is, the rest of them's been, is Watkins and Broad. Is the city going to pay to have a turn lane only?
If I may, the city is looking at intersections and identifying the priority intersections to work through to improve this. So, city is working to identify those, identify what improvements are needed, and then start to identify funding sources to improve those, so.
Right, I know,
Yeah.
there's cities improving, a lot throughout, but that's just concerned with us being out there, and so, but, cul-de-sacs, they said, fire department says, okay, I know some of them have been against the cul-de-sacs on the fire department, so I have no, but, please consider us out there. I mean, it's, not having, walking past on, on, middle ground and citation, it's gonna be a killer for us. It really is, folks. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Clayton Ransford.
Clayton Ransford, 102 Cavalcade Lane. I'm saying along the lines of, you have the amenities, and you have the housing, you have the access roads. I'm reiterating, and you can say you don't repeat everything everyone said, but if it's being repeated, that means it is really important to the community that you are going into. 4 out of the 5 accesses are through Harrison Township Beechwood Trails. And yet your city part is gonna be isolated, they have to access through our neighborhoods. Think about your neighborhoods, your homes, and have someone take a road and go right up to your area and take out a street that was right by you. So now you have a road next to your house. They are coming in through our access areas. They're increasing the traffic on our streets, our children, our roads. Wear, tear, weight limits on the township roads is different than weight limits on the city roads. There's a lot to consider of what's going on. We are gonna be paying for them to drive on the roads for the maintenance, for the wear and the tear. It is something we're not against the development. I had a chance to speak with, it's David, yes?
Yeah.
I had a chance to speak with David. I can disagree and be respectful and understand. 60 is better than what was planned. But let me say about the amenities. If you don't like the Harrison Townships or the Homeowner Association of Beechwood Trails going under, think about Barrington Ridge. I'll drive through there and I see how that is with the Homeowner Association. Then help us out in Beechwood Trails. Our people have reached out and done a lot to try and improve that pool over the past 2 or 3 years. They are not funded. These people coming in, then why are we building a pool for them, trying to get them to help make a donation to the community that they are going inside of and become an extension of? Don't forget the community that you are going inside of. And that's our main concern, I think, as a community, is we're not, the development, this is the best case of what, we'll have 240, you said, Jerry, the number's 408, 224 to 60. Way better, yes, but there's still an extension of our community. And yet you're taking away from our roads, the traffic, and then even the pool, which they're still trying to, I believe, part of it correct? The pool?
Yes.
Yes. They're still trying to improve every single day, every single year. So why are we building another amenity to take away from that? You're gonna make your decisions. And I think it's already decided. The amenity's new, so now you're ruining our pool. And the entryways, 4 out of 5 go through our community, not yours. So that's our entrance, our neighborhoods, our kids. I moved there because it is a separate neighborhood to keep my kids safe. I know the cars, I know the roads. I know people who are coming in are people who live there. Now it's gonna be different. More traffic constantly on it, less safety. Take into consideration the community outside of Pataskala, because that's where you're building these homes. That's where the entrances are coming in. It's not a street from Pataskala to Pataskala, it's Harrison Township to Pataskala. Every day they have to go through there. So we have to come together as a township and a city on this decision, not just a city decision.
Thank you.
Just a few things. Dan Wolf, I live at 946 Middle Ground, which is the north cul-de-sac area, and I do butt up against the property line. Just a couple concerns that I do have. I know we've talked about snow removal, and that road goes south, and the snow plows definitely go south coming down the road, and they back up, they come down again. So somehow they're gonna be turning around if they have to push snow the other way, because I'm sure they don't wanna push it onto the cul-de-sac, because that's gonna, and if I understand correctly, there's gonna be a gate there?
Inside, a little bit inside of the
So-
property, there will be a gate. Yeah.
So with anybody who wants to get out for the new development, has to open that gate to come out?
Yes.
Okay. So there could be some issues. I guess where I'm going with that is I think it's very critical, and I think overall the plan looks fairly decent for the size homes and how big the lots are. But I think if this builder wants to truly make it a pristine kind of plan, that they have to get rid of the ambiguity, and one, working with Harrison Township and coming up with how they're going to do it before it happens. So one is it puts all the tension away, and I don't have to worry about it, and all the Beechwood Trails folks don't have to worry about how the snow is going to be removed, or people turn around in our driveways with fairly big snow plows and that. So along that same line, I think because there's a lot of properties that butt up against this new development, the HOA is key, is to be able to have that dialogue with the HOA, that they're reaching out, even though we're not homeowners in that association, reaching out and being able to get the feel, because there's gonna be a lot of issues. I don't know the law that if you're city limits and you butt up to like a township, how that changes the dynamics of the HOA requirements. It may say, and I think we all probably need to read the HOA requirements, because I sure don't want for things to be done because they butt up against our property versus what they can do in their own property. So I think having that clarity of what we can have within the HOA, their HOA, to what they can do as they butt up against a township. I don't know that, it's just kind of thinking about it. Now that the water plant and all that, I think, is gotten the okay, how are they gonna do the runoffs from the neighbors and the Harrison Township folks?
Should I?
Well, you're on a time limit, so
Okay.
we'll
I'll
let them
address all of it
the
again.
questions.
Okay, and thank you for reminding me of that. And then, and would there be any green space? Even though I know these lots are big and nice, but are they thinking about the residents that have had a house there for, 30, 40 years? Are they thinking about any green space that attaches to Harrison Township property line? Thank you.
Thank you. And just to confirm, Smith, did you pass?
They were good.
All right, we have one more, Wayne Ratliff. And I'll need to swear you in. So do you swear that any testimony you will give in this matter will be the whole truth as you shall answer unto God?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. For the record, it's 1035 Middle Ground.
So, my wife and I just bought our house a few months ago on the smaller section of Middle Ground Road, which would be the little area, the top left there. I actually lived on this road my whole life, though. My dad was the first home on this road. I believe his house was built in 1975 or 76. Since then, there's been 7 houses built on this road. That's the size of our street. It's quiet. My wife and I moved back there with our 2 little daughters because of how quiet and safe it was to stay away from traffic, so that our kids could ride their bikes down the street, so that we could walk our dog. These roads are not big. They are barely 2-lane roads as it is right now. The snow plows do enough damage to these roads. I want to know what kind of damage is going to happen when you're bringing dozers, and excavators, and
you know, 20-ton dump trucks full of soil, gravel. Who's repairing these roads that they're gonna trash? I mean, our roads may be 200 yards long, maybe, and you're gonna instantly double the population on that little street. I mean, I heard him say probably 15 times how pristine this neighborhood is. And that's great for Pataskala, but what does this do for Beechwood Trails? I wanna know how this benefits the hundreds of people that live in Beechwood Trails right now, other than clog their roads up worse than they already are. I mean, the traffic's bad enough now. I'm not sure how the superintendent of the school gave his good graces on this when the school buses that my kids get on in the morning are already full. I mean, there's no room on the school buses. There ain't even any room left in the school. The new high school's already at capacity. But we wanna stuff some more houses in there. I don't understand how you can put a Pataskala subdivision in here, let it be accessed from 4 Beechwood Trails roads, and do nothing for us. Nothing. I mean, something's gotta be done. If you don't think there's gonna be runoff issues, these houses are already swamps back here. So where's this water gonna go? These creeks are small, they fill up fast. I mean, I see nothing good about, if it's a pristine neighborhood, then build you a pristine street from Pataskala. And leave ours alone. One of these construction trucks hits one of my kids riding their bicycles, we're gonna have a problem.
Your title expired.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Sir, I have one question. At the end of the road, is it paved all the way to the Pataskala line, or have they taken that out? I know back in the day there was either a mound or a guardrail at the end of the road.
Oh, you talking to me?
Yes, sir.
No, there's not a mound, I guess you could call it a pile of brush that, you know, people like to drive down to the end of the road and unload their yard waste.
But it is paved all the way to that line,
It is
correct?
paved to the
Okay.
end to where there's
20 feet short of the boundary
Yeah.
between Harrison and Pataskala.
Gotcha.
Well, actually, I think it's about 15 feet south into
Okay, so there is a road that's already, that was cut back in 75, if I remember. There's roads that were cut to those property
There is
lines.
no road cut through there.
No, to the property line, through Beechwood.
Yes, it's a dead end.
It's a dead end, but there's a road that went to the dead end on the property line.
What's your point?
I'm just saying that that road was going to go somewhere eventually.
It was gonna connect to the other side of middle ground.
There's two middle
There's two
grounds.
middle grounds,
But it's already in the Pataskala line, you said, correct?
because it got annexed out.
You're right, it's gonna
Okay.
connect within one community.
That's all.
There's a
Just
reason
had
they're
that
not
question.
connected because of how treacherous that property is back there with the ravines and creeks and
ravine.
swamps.
Gotcha.
Clearly
In the
never
back.
walked that.
All right, that was just my question. Was there a road cut that dead ends into the, and asked and answered, thank you.
Are you trying to make the
Okay.
point that it was gonna be used anyway? Is that what your point is?
Just asking the question.
Mr. Smith, you've heard a number of questions, concerns,
Yes.
opportunity to respond, and then we'll ask.
Okay, well, a number of different things. Let's start, I guess, with, a number of people raised the issue of the construction traffic. And I think that that's a pretty fair point. I mean, I know some of this kind of goes outside the scope of kind of the changes that we put in front of you, but I do think a lot of it's worth talking about. We did talk about it a lot at the original planning commission meeting, so it's probably worth repeating. I don't know, Jack, if you could go back to that original plan. One of the advantages to what we're doing from a construction, yes, thank you. One of the advantages to what we're proposing for the site is there is going to be a considerable reduction in the amount of construction necessary on the site. So when you look at typical construction, typical subdivision development, something like this, by the way, we had looked at options like this for the site that loop the road through. We are required, if we loop that road through, to make those connections from a life safety standpoint. That was going to be required one way or the other. We still felt that pulling a road all the way through this site was too destructive to the site. And this is why. When you do that, the first thing that happens in a subdivision like this is you bring very heavy equipment in and they clear out everything. So not only the road, but they also clear out all of the lots. Basically, they create pad-ready sites for all of those homes because they're so close together. So they clear a 300-foot wide swath moving through that with heavy equipment, earth-moving equipment, and they stay on site for quite some time as they go through. The advantages to what we're doing, if you go back to that, Jack, is that each one of those gets developed. It's a much shorter period of construction because really the only thing that requires any heavy construction is the development or the continuation of those small cul-de-sacs. After that, any on-lot grading, any construction of the access drives, the common access drives, that's all smaller equipment. And so the construction time is gonna be shorter for each one of those individual cul-de-sacs. That's also gonna be staged, not across the entire site, but each one's gonna be done individually over a period of time as those lots sell. And so there's gonna be considerable less construction traffic, and considerably less heavy equipment on that site. We understand that the township has weight requirements on their roads. We know, we've had that conversation, we understand that, we have to abide by that. So we're going to abide by the weight limits that are established by the township, by the county for each of those roads during construction with the equipment. And if that modifies the kind of equipment that we can bring to the site and use, certainly will. Because again, the intent is not to bring in, you know, giant earth moving equipment. The intent is to create as minimal a footprint as possible as we do this and create those home sites. The schools. Why did the school superintendent respond the way that he responded? I didn't talk directly to the superintendent. My guess is that he saw the considerable reduction from what was approved and what permitted under the current zoning to what's being proposed, and sees that as a welcome change, as most of the homeowners have expressed, you know, to you this evening, that they do believe that this is a better plan. I think that the school superintendent probably felt the same thing. Again, I can't speak for him. The homeowners association, I know a number of things have come up in response to that. I think Scott did a nice job of covering that, but I think it's worth repeating. A lot of times with homeowners associations in the past, they didn't include language that allowed them to assess those homes. They were required payments, but if the homeowner just said, forget you guys, I'm not paying you, it was a lot more difficult to collect. We have language in the homeowners association that legally allows the city to assess those houses to make those payments. Scott, is that a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay, so those are essentially a forced and funded homeowners association, so it's not optional. It's either assessed through the taxes, the property taxes, or the homeowner pays it voluntarily like they're supposed to. And any subsequent buyer, again, is going to be held to those standards. Certainly understand the concerns over the traffic. I mean, if you look at the way this plan is designed versus the way that it would be if it met all of the subdivision regulations, there's a considerable more distribution of traffic. So again, each one of those cul-de-sacs does not connect. There's 5 cul-de-sacs, there's 60 homes. So if you divide that out, it's a maximum, and this isn't exactly true, but it's on average, it's 12 houses per cul-de-sac. It's 12 new houses on the street. on each of those connection points. So it's considerable reduction in traffic from people cutting through the site, and certainly from what is there or what is permitted to be developed on site today through the existing zoning. So we do see that as an improvement, understand that there are certainly concerns. I can't take that away from any of those folks, but we see this as a considerable improvement, not only to the overall neighborhood, but to the city of Pataskala and for that site as well. What have I missed at this point?
Our safety.
Traffic, construction,
Green space?
green space. There was a question about the green space. So while there is no dedicated park space in the development, I think you could argue that there's a considerable amount of green space in the development. The entire site is gonna, remain wooded with the exception of the home sites and the cul-de-sacs. We have the amenity area up front for the use of the residents, but the goal is not to clear open space or parkland out of the development. The goal is to have a wooded site, and to continue a wooded site. There have been a couple of questions raised in regards to the horse farm. We have certainly heard those before. We've actually, from our previous plan, widened those lots a little bit. If you look, the horse farm is partially under a very large high-tension power easement that goes kind of north-south through that property. We anticipate that anybody that buys there is going to want to push their house as far away from that as possible. So we don't envision them putting their house right up next to the easement. And we're talking about two houses. We're not talking about a row of 80-foot lots. We're talking about two houses on large lots. So we feel like there's adequate buffer in there to accommodate that. It should not be hopefully a concern. Water runoff. Obviously, we're going to have to account for any additional runoff. Stormwater regulations dictate that. So as we go through that process, the engineer who's with me here this evening is going to have to go through a considerable amount of work to prove to the city, prove to the county, prove to the EPA that we can accommodate our stormwater and make sure that we account for any water that's currently coming on site from off-site and properly capturing that, retaining it, and releasing it at a pre-developed rate. That's the law, and we anticipate being able to comply with that law.
Why can't you make a road from Pataskala into this neighborhood?
One of the concerns was actually the gentleman talking right now on, I think you're on Middle Ground,
Yes, ma'am.
and then the other gentleman was on Middle Ground. Was that you? That walks the,
The first one.
and they walk that area. There's a walking
Walk.
path somewhere?
No, there's no walking
There's no
path.
walking path, but you guys walk the street?
Yeah, we're street walkers.
I'm gonna leave that alone.
So, when they're, I guess just, can you address their concerns about the traffic that will be added to that area as far as the walking and the safety of the children in that area? I mean, obviously, safety for children is something on every street, and there's, some streets have a lot more traffic than others as far as concerns for children's safety.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're concerned about that as well, but, is there some kind of, someone else also brought up is there what are they getting out of it, basically, other than more traffic and more damage to their streets? What are they getting out of it?
We're not allowed to play pickleball.
But, I think that with any development, you're gonna have, concerns, but is there anything you can address as far as those particular concerns?
Well, I mean, in any development, in any scenario, I mean, and Scott and Jack can tell you, being city planners, no matter where you develop, whether it's this site, a different site, anytime there's a stub street, the city, the township, or the county engineer, they always want connectivity between those, right? They want to allow for the disbursement of traffic. We're dispersing traffic in a different way. We're creating fewer home sites on a smaller section of road that will only have access to that road, not through the site. So for one, we're not gonna be dragging people through the site, connected to those other intersections, and that goes both ways. It also means that folks from Beechwood Trails won't be able to drive through the site to get down to Kroger, we understand that. But it also means that people won't be driving through our subdivision to get up there and go out in some other direction. So it's gonna be the individual amount of homes on each cul-de-sac, and yes, they are gonna access, the township road. They're gonna have to abide by all of the same rules and the same safety standards that everybody else who drives that township road, who lives there or drives through there, has to abide by. So we understand that. So it is some additional traffic, but when you look at ultimately what could be developed there, it's considerably less traffic than what is allowed by zoning today.
Are there signs there for caution,
No.
street signs or anything like that for,
No, no.
you know?
No, we don't have any police presence, which is part of the problem anyway. All we have is sheriff. So, I mean, we have people that live in our development that go faster than 25 now. So, I mean, you're gonna be
Right.
adding more vehicles.
I think that's with every street.
Agreed.
Believe me, I live on Mill Street. It's a nightmare. I think you've all driven it and probably gone 50 miles an hour on it.
Yeah.
I've seen ya. I have you on my Ring camera.
Well, and we all have
And
the
we
same
have
problem.
people that walk on our street. We have bicycle riders. We
Your
have
brothers.
horses that go down our street. And it's a problem in every city, and I respect your concerns as far as, you know, I really do. Because it's a complete change to what you bought into and what you live with. What we have to look at is what was previously allowed already was a development was already zoned for homes, so we didn't really have any choice in that matter, it was already zoned that.
But
So
it
we
could-
have to work with what we're given, and this gentleman this developer is offering 60 homes as opposed to 400
We would have a
homes.
gripe if you would take them out the other way, and he's concerned about, well, they'll do less, bulldozing. We don't care what they do to their land.
Right, I understand your
It's,
concern
you know,
is
to
using
our-
your
you know,
streets, so,
Which they don't have to.
And I understand the concern, but the reality is, I mean, there's interconnectivity all over the place, right? Everybody uses township and city streets, but not everybody pays into township or city taxes. I mean, I think it's fair to say that a lot of folks in this room drive on city streets, right? They go to the Kroger, they get on Broad Street, I mean, they go in other directions. And that doesn't make anybody feel better about it, but the reality is that's all baked in.
yeah,
Right, I mean, so we're kind of dealing the cards that we've been dealt, trying to create a situation that I think is hopefully better for the site, better for the surrounding neighborhood, a better development pattern, in terms of, respecting what's there, the natural features. And, hopefully that's ultimately seen as an improvement over, what was previously there.
And this has already been approved as far as streets access. There's not a change to the original approval.
Correct, the access
So-
points have not changed from what was originally
We can't
recommended for
change that
approval
at
in
this
May
point.
1st.
This is done.
Correct, what
and
we're
approved.
reviewing tonight would be an amendment that's for the reconfiguration of lots, add the language to the plans and the development text, HOA documents. The other amendment was the walking paths and the amenity area. So that's the review tonight, because what's before council has 60 lots without the language and without the configuration, without the amenity area. So that's before council currently.
So the streets are already a done deal as far as access. What we can discuss is the fact that construction debris on streets and gravel is supposed to be cleaned up.
Certainly.
Go ahead.
So typically, and I'm not the public service director and I'm not an engineer, but typically what has happened, and I've seen this done in the past, is if you're going through, let's say we have an established subdivision, and let's say they're all in Pataskla for sake of argument. So what would be done is you identify, here's the current street conditions pre-construction, and you document those, take pictures and everything. Post-construction, you go back and you say, here's the damage that was done, and either you pay to fix it or you're assessed. Because I can understand, particularly if middle ground was just paved, I don't want to pave it again. So it would be the developer's responsibility, and I'll have to talk to the public service director and work with Harrison Township to make sure that any damage done by the construction equipment will be paid for one way or another. Either they do the repairs or they pay Harrison Township the cost of the repairs.
We just need to wait, 5 years till post-construction.
I don't know the construction schedule.
If you went back there, you would know, because it's not something that's gonna be popped up in 2 months.
And again, I don't know.
The significant period of construction will be the construction of that street. Once the construction of that street's done, the heavy equipment is done. Then they're bringing in smaller dozers, smaller dump trucks. All of those things as they do the individual homes, it's gonna be considerably lighter construction. I understand what you're saying, Scott. I think, we're open to having those discussions. The challenge will be ultimately is, there will, during that same time period, there will also be other people using that street. We won't be the only person using that street.
That's correct, and as I stated, I'm not the public service director, I'm not an engineer, but I've seen this practice in the past.
Right. I mean, there will be other vehicles. So however that works, whatever the fair and equitable distribution of that, I think those are conversations that we're open to having, as long as, we're not held responsible for all the wear and tear, because it won't be all.
What about the amenity location?
So, as far as the length of time that they're held responsible for the repairs of the streets, if there is any damage, we're not looking at just 2 months later, because damage can show up in the wintertime when water starts flowing a different way.
It can, and I've seen it, and again, I'm not an expert on this, and I try to
There's
practice,
also
but-
load limits put on the roads there.
And I've
Right.
seen
That
this
will
done.
reduce some
For the
construction.
benefit of the folks that have shown up, is there a standard operating procedure?
I imagine there is,
For
but
repair.
I
But
don't
you
know off
don't
the top of
know,
my head, yeah.
But if there is one, and there probably is, that would be enforced. But if you're concerned about it, I would recommend contacting, the street department director and asking him what that would be.
Can we not add that as a requirement?
You wanna
that goes in the
add it as
language? That goes in the language that everybody can stand up here and make a promise.
Well, if it's code, it's code.
Well, that's what
If
I'm
they have to,
saying.
it's have to, but we can't amend the code
Mhm.
tonight.
Agreed, but we can ask the question so we can have it verified for the next meeting.
Can our
Yeah.
trustees say something?
Yeah, if you want to come up and, we actually have one of the trustees here.
Oh, okay.
And
I didn't want to.
I will swear you in. So, do you swear that any testimony we have in this matter will be the whole truth as you shall answer unto God?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
My name is Mark Van Buren, address is 4832 Keller Road, Hebron, Ohio, 43025. Maybe I can kind of talk about the streets. First of all, I just want to say, myself and the Board of Trustees, we're not real thrilled with you using our streets. We've had this discussion before, but it is what it is. On the streets, presently, Harrison Township, we have a weight limit in the wintertime. From January to April 15th is a 50% weight reduction. So that means instead of running an 80,000-pound truck, you can only run a 40,000-pound truck. We also do not give permits. Licking County has the same process. Township government's a little different than city government. We go through the county. The county, on county roads, you can buy a $100 permit, I think it is, and run heavy trucks on roads. We don't do that, because $100 isn't gonna fix a road. By law, and to answer some of your questions and people in the audience, by law, they have every right to run on our roads. We put a lot of money over time. There's probably anywhere from 8 to 12 inches of asphalt now on some of those roads. When AEP came through and they drilled and put the new power lines in, we couldn't stop them. We made them put a bond up and then went out and actually drilled and made sure our roads were safe enough to, but that's way overloaded equipment. Like I said, we're not real thrilled having Pataska looking on, even though we want to be good neighbors. As for the snow removal, when we have a conversation when it comes time to build those sections into Harrison Township, my guess is we're asking you guys, and they have been good to work with, is to put some type of place where we can shove that snow off to the side and put maybe a T-turnaround. There's things we can do because we're not gonna go forward, back up. We're not gonna spend a lot of time, trying to push snow. If not, you need to put electric underneath the road because you have to melt the snow, because we will put in front of your gates if we have to work hard to do it. We don't wanna do that though. The other part of it is, the road construction in Harrison Township, the way township government works is, we have the county engineer. We don't have to have our own house engineer. The county engineer works with us, and they review the plans along with our board of trustees and along with Ben Patterson, the road superintendent. And that'll be inspected and everything. But the biggest issue I see as a trustee is, number one, like I said, I can say it over and over, but it doesn't matter, is that traffic coming into our quiet community. But the other part of it is snow control. And then the one thing is, and I spoke about this when we talked about apartments on Watkins and Broad Street, that intersection, probably it's not your worst intersection in the city of Pataska. I drive down through Summit and there's a lot worse intersections. My concern is, I don't want that intersection to have to get so bad before a flag goes up. And I really think this is the time, and I said this before, this is a time we work together. Licking County has part of that. Actually, Harrison Township, we don't have a rate in Watkins, and we're out of that game, except for our residents having to sit back 3 or 4 light changes to get out on that road, on Broad Street. So I just would ask is, let's work together. I talked to the county engineer, he's willing to sit down and talk. I hope Pataska will be willing to sit down and talk. Because what I'd like to see is that intersection is gonna be developed. It's gonna be. Now's the time to make sure we have the right of ways set off to the sides, and that way when it comes time to improve that intersection, you're not gonna have to pay millions of dollars for right of way. That's something that I really would like to see us work together on. I can answer any other questions, happy to. I can't say it enough. We wish you would just take a road straight to Pataska and take those fine residents that's gonna be living there straight into Pataska. That way they can shop quicker. But I understand we're not here to talk about that at this point, so. My other concern is HOAs. We have them throughout Harrison Township, just like you have them throughout the city of Pataska. They're really exciting when the first houses go in. We give them 5 or 6 years, it's a done deal most of the time. I would encourage you to have a private company run the HOA and somebody that's professional, and now help that out a little bit, so. Any other question? Oh, I forgot. I think there's bats back there.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? He says there's
That's why-
endangered bats back here, so if you can look into that. But
Well, the Indiana bat season definitely impacts the construction timing, but we'll certainly have to deal with that, as we would on any construction site.
Because we like our bats in Harrison Township.
Don't we all?
We don't want anything
What
bad.
about the deers and
The,
wild turkeys?
I'm sorry, who's up here? Any
Is
questions?
there any questions? I'd be happy. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I definitely don't disagree with anything you said. I mean, we're gonna continue to have those conversations with the county engineer, the township, and the public safety director. These are, I understand it's outside a little bit of the scope of the changes that we're presenting today. These are engineering issues, and they're gonna be solved by the engineers through the engineering process. It really isn't a zoning issue. There is, hard and fast numbers, calculations, all of those things that get considered by the county engineer. He's got to sign off. The city engineer has to sign off. And so there's a lot of people that have to sign off on this before anything happens. So all of that is going to be addressed at the end of this process.
Couple things. The amenities area, was there consideration for types of screening and things around that, both for the privacy of the amenity users, but for the surrounding homes? Maybe cut down on
Yeah, well,
noise or whatever?
again, we're going to try and preserve as many of those trees as we install those amenities on that site. So we're not just going to go in and clear that entire piece of property. We're also planning on a little bit of fencing around the perimeter. And then if it's a pool or tennis court, you know, they'll have to have their own kind of fencing, and, you know, landscaping inside of there. We just don't know what that looks like yet. The reason that we didn't pull that somewhere in the middle of the site is because we didn't want to drag a road all the way to the middle of the site and destroy all of those trees doing it. So we felt like that was really the best location, because we're already building the road there. It's, you know, right there at the entrance to the development. It's pretty similar to what you see in a lot of other developments. That amenities usually right kind of at the entrance, unless, you know, it's a relatively open field, and then you might have a big green space right in the middle that sits there.
Also, I know we've discussed the use of roads and damage of roads. However, I think it would warrant as well, being good neighboring with the township, to explain the process of enforcing construction debris, dirt, mud, rocks, etc. on roads.
Yep.
And is there a way to maybe work with our partners in the township to ensure that impact isn't felt on the residents?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we can do, because we do that currently with our zoning inspector. He's more than happy to go after developers and make sure they're towing the line. So
Right.
if we say we need to work with Harrison Township to make sure that happens, he's gonna be licking his chops, so.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's obvious if there's construction mud and or gravel in there,
Yes.
that's the only construction in there, whether it's on township roads, it had to come from the Pasco side first.
Exactly.
I think,
For sure. And that's on us.
a way for us to also help and provide a little bit more of that, assistance as neighbors with the residents there, I think that is something that we can do, and if that's something we have to put in the wording here.
Yeah, and with the assessment, again, I don't know all the language, we don't get too specific and then create an issue, so I think work with Harrison Township to address road maintenance, and we can identify construction traffic, construction debris. We can do that. We would do it anyway, but for a safeguard to make sure everybody feels better, and I get it, if we put a condition to, you know, the city of Pataska shall work with Harrison Township to address any issues, including but not limited to construction traffic, construction debris, road maintenance, some of those items.
Can I make a suggestion of the wording? Could you please put in there that the city of Pataska will keep the roads clean?
We can do, I just don't wanna pigeonhole it, that this way it gives us a chance to work together, instead of saying,
Yeah, the only reason I say that, we can say that we can work together, you don't have authority on Harrison Township roads.
I don't.
No,
Absolutely not.
we have the authority, and we have the staff that would watch it like we do other subdivisions, and what we do is, quite frankly, if they don't get them clean, we call the sheriff's department, sheriff come down, and they take care of it. And we also have this conversation, but if you really want to throw, what I'd say, a bone, or to show the residents that's sitting here today, put in there the word will.
Shall,
Or shall.
shall.
You shall keep those roads clean. And that shows that City of Pataska is saying, yes, we care about what they're saying, we're gonna make sure those roads are clean. And then that puts it on your responsibility.
Are you talking about construction cleaning, or are you talking about after construction is completed?
Well, we like clean roads, so I mean.
I
if we
mean,
can
that's
take care
kind
that
of,
before-
I think it would be.
Talking about
Fine.
construction. It's talking about construction activity.
We can't do it in perpetuity, but during construction,
Yeah,
Fortunately,
making sure
no.
that the roads stay.
I'm here
I don't have that
representing
authority
I'm
over
not sure
Harrison
why
Township
the
road.
city needs to be on the hook for that when it's construction.
Ma'am, in all seriousness,
Debris.
I see where you're coming from, but if you wanna put something in there that says we will work together or something like that, to me, it's like, what is the definition of working together? You know, if you
Well,
really
that's
want.
but as tax, I mean, how do I put this? I understand what you're saying,
Mhm.
I understand the concerns about any kind of damage. However, we can subject ourselves to lawsuits, the city to a lawsuit, by putting wording like that in. I have concerns about it. I don't think we can just
The-
do it and not consult the law director.
The bottom line is, though, that we are required to keep those streets clean. of
Exactly.
Construction debris, you've already stated.
And
The
we have,
sheriff will
tools
get a
to do
phone
it.
call. We're going to be forced to do that. it's not the city's responsibility,
Right.
it's the developer, it's the contractor's responsibility and the developer's responsibility to make sure that he does it. And if the developer's not following through with his responsibility, he's gonna get a call from the township. If that doesn't resolve it, he's gonna get a visit from the
I
sheriff.
don't think the
Absolutely,
township
and that
has
was my
anything to
point, too.
worry about.
But-
They're in good hands right here.
No, but what I'm saying is, if you really wanna say that we care about the residents of Harrison Township, put in there shall, and then that way you can bring your equipment and brush it off.
Well, it'll be the development, the only problem is we can't,
I understand.
we can't take them to mayor's court if it's in Harrison Township. That's what I'm saying, we can work together to find a
You
solution.
take them Licking County Municipal Court.
We can do that, but then we would
That's
work
your
with you and
outlet.
Mr. Frederick to take those steps,
He's
so
gonna
that's the,
retire, so, in October.
we'll work with you then directly.
That was my point, is
Mhm.
I know as the city, we have kind of an enforcement branch on that,
Mhm.
so.
We
um,
do,
just the-
we can too. I mean, in all
That was
seriousness.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was getting, if we could, I just wanted to make sure if there was any sort of wording, to the amendment that we needed to do, since we have this opportunity, that gets in there.
And thank
I
you,
think that
I
would be
appreciate that.
neighborly.
And I'm going to throw something out there while I have it on my mind. They're struggling with their pool.
I think we nicely make a donation.
Maybe?
I appreciate that. If they
It's just a
do,
thought, I'm just throwing it
if,
out.
yeah, I understand what you're saying. If they do end up installing a pool, it will be at the direction of the residents and paid for by those residents.
Right, but if they did, if they wanted to have a pool but not have it on, maybe they could
Well, that would be up to
use
the,
the
yeah.
Beechwood Trails pool
that would
and
be up to the
contribute to
buyer.
it, and then they're getting something.
And
that would-
that would be up to the buyers of those lots, if
Right.
they wanted to join with
Just
the
a thought.
Beechwood Trails Homeowners Association to help maintain that pool and have use of that pool. That might be a good way to spread the cost around, but that will be up to them.
Could I ask a point of clarification? Back with the sewer, do you mind?
Okay.
On the report tonight on page 4, number 2, under public utilities, it said that the 1/3 of the sewer was Pataskala. I just looked it up, I couldn't remember when I was up here. 2/3 was going to Southwest. Is that still true? I know we,
And this was from the previous comments, because previously we'd explored options. This was from May, and originally we had explored, hey, perhaps you take one portion, we'll take the other.
okay.
Then it got to council, and during that time, Southwest, the Water and Sewer District said, you know what, that's not gonna work for us. Then they said, we're gonna do the force main, but then our utility committee said, we're not comfortable with that. So then the language is drafted, and we came back. So nothing will go to the Water and Sewer District.
How does that look at construction wise, as far as interruption, getting lines from Pataskala up in there instead of tying into the?
I think it's those walking paths, right?
Yeah, it'll go through the walking path, but everything originates down, that Devoncroft and then works its way up.
And use of the walking paths?
That's correct.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You ask us to be good neighbors, and I appreciate that. But I want you to realize this has been on the books for quite some time. Who owned this land before Dominion Homes was brought up? There was a lot of times where this development got pushed back by our township, even a year ago, got pushed back by our township. You keep asking us to be good neighbors, and you know what, we will. Because there's nothing we can do to stop this development from going in, and you knocked it down to 60 compared to 200, what it was before. We do appreciate that. You're keeping the land, you're trying to make it look good. But being a good neighbor does go both ways. You're saying you don't want traffic going through, paying for taxes on our streets. Now we're paying for taxes of people going through our streets through yours because they live in your city, but their only access is through us. You're asking us to be good neighbors, and we will, and we are. We have voiced our concerns for over a year trying to be good neighbors, and it wasn't heard, and so now we have to deal with this, which is fine. We're gonna make the best of the situation. But being good neighbors goes both ways. You have heard people speak about what is needed here from our end. Don't forget that. Because being good neighbors is not us saying, okay, we're gonna do this. It's you as well realizing it's been years of us telling you this. Sorry for the interruption, I do appreciate your ears during that time. The people who came, presented, did a great job. You guys had a good time being calm for us, and I appreciate that and gave us your night. So thank you for your ears, but hear the concern of Beechwood Trails.
Other questions, comments?
No more questions. Little deliberation maybe, discuss.
My question was for you, is somewhat small because, earlier you talked about the cul-de-sacs. I believe I heard you say they're gonna be working in phases, is that correct? Like, the construction will be in phases according to the cul-de-sacs?
Yeah, we haven't figured out the timing of that yet, but the intent would be to open up, the southern cul-de-sac first, because that's where all the sewer work is, on the southeastern, the existing gas. So to open that first, open those lots up first, start the sales, and then based on the sales projection, continue to open up each individual cul-de-sac. I don't think that they're all gonna be constructed at the same time. I think they'll be constructed individually, one at a time. What that looks like, in terms of the timing, will it be one this year, one 5 years from now, or one this year, one 3 months from now? A lot of that depends on the interest in the lots, and how that moves forward, but that's ultimately how that'll progress.
Thanks, David. Any other comments, questions? I think you're set. Thank you. Now we have a period of deliberation amongst the commission members.
I do have one question for
Yes.
Scott. And I got the wording for the city of Patasko shall work with Harrison Township.
He's got it written.
You got it,
I tried
perfect,
this,
thank you,
but-
because I know you had a lot of exclusions, I just wanted to make sure, thank you. Okay.
Any comments, or discussion amongst commission members? Remember, that, again, this is what we're considering are the changes from the one that was recommended for approval back in May of last year. And this also goes to council for their final approval.
I think the additional walking paths make sense with the easements for the water pulling out of Pataskla. I mean, it does make sense. And also tying into the amenities, which would be off of the Pataskla cul-de-sac. The only concern is with the amenities is what, right? And we've discussed that a little bit today, but I think there's provisions in place, depending on what is brought to us, or to the city, based on permits, or like. My concern would be, screening around that area, and I don't know, is it required just like with businesses that it has to maintain a certain screening?
Let's say they do a pool, they're required a minimum of 5-foot fence. I was looking at the aerial and the plan, so it looks like based upon their concept, that there would be 20, 30, 40 feet, and it's already wooded in that area, so a natural buffer would be in place. The only screening that would be required if they did a pool would be a minimum 5-foot fence.
And then the discussion on the snow removal at the gates, I think a few other people kind of had you envision big pile pushing the streets worth of snow right up to a gate, where's it go? You know, it's dead end at that point, right? So having, and I as Mr. Van Buren touched on it, having a side spot to push that snow is an excellent idea, so I'm glad they're thinking that far ahead on that, so. But as far as the other amendments to this, I don't see an issue with any of the other amendments.
Did we address all of the questions by Nancy Arledge and Brian Berkey? One of them was, this is the owner of the Gables. And one of her, let's see, let's go number one. The proximity to our outdoor riding arena and the effect of no buffer in this section of the development. Lots 24 and 25 are slated directly parallel to the arena, where we teach riding lessons and host horse shows 7 months of the year at least. And I think we talked about that. There are 2 homes that are right against her property. But the setback seems to be okay.
It looks like all the homes are at the farthest point away from the property lines.
Yeah, it seems like,
They've done a nice job of,
yes, I'm not sure what her concern was, I'm not sure.
every home, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 I saw, is the furthest point away from
Yeah, but I don't,
the Harrison Township property lines.
can I interrupt for a second? I don't think, those are just pictures. Cause you can put your house wherever as long as you're,
But it's still a
Listening to the
construction plan
geese.
that has to be finalized and discussed with Harrison Township and Pataskala and Licking County.
The design of your house and where you're gonna put it, so you can't
It
just bring
still
in a
will go
shanty.
into the construction conversations with Harrison, Pataskala, and Licking County.
Cause I think that's her concern, is
She said
these
there's
people aren't gonna realize what
the
they're getting
effect
into.
of no buffer in this section. The buffer being, I guess there are no trees there? I don't know what she's,
Well, and just from reviewing the sample declaration that we have in the back, the deed restrictions, the, number 6, and also in the packet online, under the HOA, that homeowner, I think, will have the authority to ask for approval to install additional trees if whatever foliage that's currently there isn't sufficient. So that's definitely something that the individual owners would be able to address if and when it comes to the point where they're upset about the dust, or they're upset about noise or whatever.
I'm sure if they're building this kind of home, they're gonna want privacy back here.
well,
I'm not gonna build a home.
I'm
like
not
that on
talking
this
about the
side.
new buyers, I'm talking about the concern of this current
No,
stable
I understand.
owner. It's her
I'm also
concern
concerned
about
about
the
the parking
buffer.
and the fact
But
that,
she
is there
has-
enough parking there for the stables?
I'm concerned about that, but that's her problem already.
You would think.
She bought it with that, and she maybe needs to, I don't know what she can do. She's using the streets now for parking,
Mhm.
which I don't even know if that's legal,
I don't either.
you know?
I don't know their
That's-
laws, so I don't know. what
Right,
Harrison
I don't,
Township does.
Not really.
I don't know
within
what
our
Harrison
purview,
Township
yeah.
laws are. I know Pataskala has certain codes for, if you're gonna operate a business, you have to have sufficient parking. So,
So there's a lot
that,
of give and take on that,
Yeah.
both sides.
so, I mean, I think that the development already appreciates them, and they're not really
I think
bothered.
you'd find there's some that don't appreciate
There
all
are
the
some- oh.
parking on the.
Okay, there you go. See, what do I
But
know?
they're not here to speak, so that's.
Okay. So, you know, as far as, so that, he said that there's a power line running along there anyway. So,
Which is running, I think, on the
in
most
between the
west
lots, so.
or east part, so they're gonna wanna put the house on the west side.
Yeah.
May I make a comment, please?
Sure.
Jack, do you have an aerial for that area? An actual photo?
Current site conditions, so
Yeah.
that later.
Like, they were asking where the power line is.
Oh, the power
He
line.
said the
The
power,
easement for power line.
the
Like a Google satellite.
builder said that the power lines run north and south on that.
They do.
So,
The question is
There's
it on
no-
the east or west side of the lot up there?
there's no, trees, I guess.
Right here.
And
Right.
her concern, there's no buffer, there are no trees, it's maybe open there?
Well, AEP took.
Yeah, AP took care of that, they cleared it, so,
The question I would have, and I'm sorry, and I get back to township resolutions. If we have unlike uses, not unlike zoning, but unlike uses, like if you put a gas station next to a residential property, you have to do buffering between it.
right.
Wouldn't you say that an agriculture facility is unlike use to residential? And wouldn't you think you would make them have, it's two different things. Look at the Croton Egg Farm, how people got sued up there. You know, because they're gonna say we can't enjoy our property because they're running horses dust. My argument would seriously be, I can sit up here and joke about it, but seriously, that's unlike use. You have an agriculture horse facility, you have a residential, you have a $500,000 house. I would say between those two houses and the stables, there should be buffering through there. That's just because it is unlike use.
Well, it's currently not required in our agricultural district, because right now we have houses and agricultural uses abutting each other that is not required.
And I would say a cornfield is different than horses.
I don't disagree, but we do have instances where stables and things
Yeah.
are directly adjacent.
I do my, because I'm just thinking, what can you do now to solve the problem down the road? Buffering would
I
solve that
completely
problem.
agree.
I would like to add one thing, and I think it is important to consider. We're having this conversation as if we believe that somebody who hates horses is gonna move into those homes.
It could happen.
I understand his point, but I live near Croton Lake Farm. I chose to move out there, I knew it was there before I moved there. Anybody that moves into either one of those two lots is gonna have to drive right by the stables to get there. They will have the option to do additional landscaping, to site their house in a way that minimizes their view of the stables if they don't wanna look at it. They will have the opportunity to put in additional screening on their lot. That's not a problem. But you might have somebody that moves in there that loves horses. One of the reasons why we moved out where we moved is because my wife loves horses, and we moved next to a horse farm where we have horses running all the time. And the egg farm's out there, and we knew it, but that's what we wanted. So we do envision that there are some people that will move in there, or potentially move in there, that don't have a concern. And if they do have a concern with horses, there's 58 other lots in the development that they could choose to move into. That's the only thing I wanted to add.
At our last meeting, you said something about putting trees in.
They could,
You
if
know,
they choose to.
you was going, as a developer, you would put, evergreen, you did last meeting, sir.
I mean, that would be a cheap, regardless whether you said it or not, that would be a cheap thing if that homeowner wanted some trees, you guys could throw those in. That would be a cheap expense for you guys to keep on keeping on.
I would agree. If the homeowner wanted the trees, then we'll have the option to put trees in to sell that lot, for sure.
You made a comment that
We're-
we knew that
Okay,
that was
yeah,
gonna be
We're back
we're
in
having our,
our
please.
the
deliberations.
homeowner knew that was gonna be there when it drove past the stable.
Any other
They
comments?
would-
I don't have any more questions.
When I moved into Beechwood Trails 15 years ago, had no idea there's gonna be
Sir?
development with people coming through my neighborhood.
Thank you.
It's changing the complete character of my neighborhood. I have no choice in that.
Sir?
And nobody has
Hey,
mentioned,
we are in deliberations. If
Please.
you want to talk to them, please.
nobody's
interrupt the
mentioned real
meeting.
estate values in this whole conversation.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So,
I don't
just
have
bring it
any
up.
more. I mean, I think we exhausted all of our questions. It looks like if we did put a motion on there, we would need to put 3, which is addition of the language sheet, and then 4, which is the, City of Pataskala shall work with Harrison Township.
Are we
I don't
prepared
know
for
if there's any-
action on it? You can shoot.
Yes. I'll make a motion that we approve for city, or would that we approve for city council's approval, application number ZON-19-05 pursuant to section 1255.19 of Tabasco Code, with the following modifications. 2 which are listed, 3 is the additional language for the scenic view estates common concerns, and 4 is the city of Pataskala shall work with Harrison Township to address, including but not limited to, road maintenance, road repair, and road cleanliness in retaliation to construction activity.
Relation.
What?
Relation.
Relation. Oh, in
Not to
relation.
retaliate, but that.
Or
that's
I'm
gonna
sorry,
go
in
over.
relation to construction activity, yeah, I'm sorry.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to recommend, to approve this and pass it on to council with those 4 modifications. Do we have a second?
Second motion.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Discussion on the motion? Roll call.
Second.
Oh, I'm
Did
sorry.
somebody second it?
Charlie.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
Charlie
I
did.
didn't hear.
Roll call.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Rogers,
Yes.
Ms. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Truax,
Yes.
Mr. Boggs,
Yes,
Mr. Epperson.
Yes.
that motion passes, and as Scott explained earlier, that'll go to council.
Should be, if I'm doing the math right, should be January 25th at 6:30, 7 is when the meeting starts. It'll be here in council chambers.
Thank you.
January what?
25th.
That's a Saturday.
You got the 20th?
20,
I love these meetings, it's what I do for a living, but I got a wife and kids at home.
Enjoy.
As do you folks all, that you get back to.
Happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
All right, next on the agenda, we have code amendment application ZON 19-009.
Okay, you thought that one was difficult. Wait till you get to that. So it's a code amendment application, City of Pataska citywide, and the request is to amend chapter 1287 off-site impacts. So 1287 off-site impacts protects uses in all districts from objectionable off-site impacts, including but not limited to noise, vibration, glare, odors, etc. So as it's currently written, there's no penalty section, therefore the chapter cannot be enforced. So if there's a loud noise, we say please stop. If they say no, we can't do anything. So the proposed amendment would add a penalty section. This penalty section references the overall penalty section in section 1209.99. As we know, following a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, this will proceed to council for consideration. Surprisingly, no comments from other departments or agencies, no modifications. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? We'll just leave it open, rather than go round robin.
I actually do, how are we gonna measure said issues? Cause
We
what's
do-
loud to one person is not loud to another.
It's 60 decibels as measured from the property line. We do have 0.5 foot candles of light, and we do have a light meter. So we do have
Okay.
a tool, yeah. It's all in there like with the
What were the other ones, odor and?
odor. I hate to say this, but I think there's like a centometer that we do not have.
As long as it's measurable and there is a
It
set
is.
range that
Yes.
people are allowed to have, because you're gonna get neighbors that are petty.
Yes.
And it's gonna be an issue, so as long as it's not just a blanket noise, whatever, it's gotta be measurable.
Agree, it's all quantifiable, so you can put a number to it and say this.
And we did, way back when this was drafted, we made that attempt to put specific numbers in there so that it wasn't measurable.
And I see in B you have that the city does not have equipment or expertise to measuring the elevated and specific complaints. It may request assistance from another agency.
That's currently in the code, yes. The
Yes,
only
it-
change is penalty section. Everything else stays the same.
Other questions? No? Oh, come on.
Not on this one.
Actually,
Ah.
is there, no, just real quick, is there a time limit, or is there a certain period of time that the smell, I mean, I'm just thinking of if someone has a bonfire and a neighbor is petty, that's not something where we're gonna walk out that day or whatever and cite someone, right?
No, typically how our code enforcement process works, that if there was a bonfire and someone said, this smells, we're probably not gonna, unless it's like a fire department thing or anything, it's like, well, this is just a temporary, one evening thing.
Perfect.
Someone does it months straight, but our code enforcement process, you get a door hanger where we make contact, say, please stop. 7 days, you get a courtesy letter that's nicely worded, that's mailed you, that says, please stop. After 7 more days, you get a violation letter that says, if you don't stop, there's consequences, then mayor's court. And if someone repeatedly violates, we skip a step and keep moving up. So, yeah, typically we don't go after heavy-handed. It's usually, has to be pretty bad.
So this isn't anything that Leo's responding to a party noise complaint or something like that?
That would be police.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're thinking if somebody's got like a machine equipment or something that's making excessive noise or
Yeah,
odors or-
I believe there's something that says, if it's part of your operations that this happens, I believe it's okay. Yeah, so this would have to be something pretty egregious.
I'm just thinking potential brew houses and things like that will have some odors. Is that something
That, we'd have to check the centometer.
But that would be in its normal course of operation.
It would be with the normal course of operation.
You can hire my services.
Ann's got it now.
But
father always said
typically I
never
know,
go
because I live near the Budweiser plant, and
I grew up next to a Miller plant, so.
yeah, so usually it's like, I don't smell anything. Usually.
It smells like cooked green beans to
Yeah.
me.
But do you remember when the Wonder Bread plant was downtown?
Oh,
You
yeah.
drive by
I used to
like-
love driving 670. That was
Yeah.
my favorite time.
Yeah.
It's like, yes. Wait for it and it'd come in the car.
And I imagine Lisa will take these minutes verbatim, so this
And actually, I'm looking through this again, and we're not talking about anything other than the penalty section added to it, but agriculture reason, or region, districts. We're exempting most of that now.
Yeah,
right?
there's a process by which, and you have to re-up it, I believe it's every 5 years, but you go to council and you get an agricultural exemption. And it goes through agricultural committee, and council approves it, essentially that says that you cannot be held liable for any activity such as smell, noise, etc., that goes along with normal agricultural use. This way, if you have a farm, subdivision goes in, someone can't say, oh, it stinks. It's like, yeah, you moved in next to.
So in the fall when you're chewing through.
Right.
Well, and I know that's, because we got a farm field next to us and they rebuild the soil every, it can be kind of odoriferous for a long time, not just for 15 minutes, it's like weeks.
Yeah, so they wouldn't fill
But
out the
that's part of
cenometer on that.
That's part of the agricultural function, so no big deal. All right.
I know that it's been brought up recently, last year, about issues with like the bullet ranch. What's considered a course of business for them and vice versa. This is not going to adversely affect an establishment such as that or anything else similar.
And that's interesting because this is originally how we found, like, well, wait, there's no penalty section. There are state statutes through the revised code and the other one.
Administrative code?
Thank you. That there's standards put on by the chief of the Department of Natural Resources that sets decibel levels for firing ranges. So it's all in there. It cannot exceed 90 decibels for more than 1 hour and a 24-hour period as measured from the property line, or 85 decibels for more than 8 hours of a 24-hour period as measured from the property line. So since those trump what we have, so this will not affect them.
Any other discussion? Ready to take an action?
I'll make a motion that we approve application number ZON-19-009 for city council approval pursuant to section 1217-10 of the Pataskala Code.
Second. Okay, we have Dustin seconded. Moved and seconded that we approve or pass this to council. Any discussion on the motion? Roll call.
Mr. Epperson?
Yes.
Mr. Boggs?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Truax?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Motion passes. Other business. Do we have any other business?
No,
Not
sir.
listed? Okay. Item 7, approval of the meeting minutes for the December 4th, 2019 regular meeting. I had one question on that. The application number for the distressed properties, on the document that we reviewed at the meeting, it said ZON 19008, and in the minutes it says 6. I don't know which is correct, but as long as we match, I just wanted to double check that, make sure it matches. Anybody else have any corrections or additions? If not, then with that with that stipulation to verify the application, I'll move that the minutes of the December 4th, 2019 meeting be approved as presented. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Emily. Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Truax?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Epperson?
Yes.
Mr. Boggs?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Motion passes. Anything else?
I'll make a motion we adjourn to Wednesday, February 5th, 2020.
Okay, we have a second from Dustin. Roll call?
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Epperson?
Yes.
Mr. Boggs?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Truax?
Yes.
Motion passes and we're adjourned.